Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated, where today I'm joined by Mark Sayre. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No, this is a real pleasure. Really happy for you to be on the show, and this is something that anybody Melora would recommend has to be the best.
Oh yeah, she's so sweet. I'm glad you did, and I'm happy to do it. And it's a privilege to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's start this way. Why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what it is that you do?
My name's Mark Sayre. I'm a independent film producer, and I suppose I should probably say editor now, now too, since I've edited a number of our features. I think, which is probably a rarity that the producer is editing a lot of these movies, but it has its pros and cons, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're we're getting a little taste. We're producing an audio drama. That's our first foray into
Oh, cool.
production, and it's interesting. So I've learned about some of the SAG wages, the interview process, the hiring process for actors, and just the whole background that kind of goes into something that you're producing. So we've had a little bit of
Nice.
fun with that. We've got the easy part. We're basically just kind of sitting and watching. I'm sure what you're doing is much more involved, obviously, if you're editing. But why don't you talk a little bit about, because I think a lot of people, they hear producer, but they don't really know what it means, and in a lot of cases it means a lot of different things. So what exactly
Yeah.
a producer or a producer do?
Well, it certainly depends on the title of producer, and then even within that, it's sort of different. Television and episodic is a lot different than a producer of a motion picture.
Yeah.
But before I get to those unique differences, at probably the most macro level, the way I've always tried to explain the job is that if you think of the film as a company, it's like the CEO. So you're in charge of, hiring and firing and planning and preparing and, overseeing everything, but you're really engaging people that are, the experts to take care of all of these little individual jobs.
Right.
Um, and I think a lot of the times people would think, that's maybe what the director is, but the director is really, your chief creative officer. They're the person that's executing the creative vision of the film.
Sure.
And then, somebody that would be below me would be like a line producer, which would be more like your chief operating officer. They're dealing with the micro day-to-day mechanics of, pushing a production forward. You know, Outside of that, sort of overarching blanket summary of how it works, you do a lot of everything. And sometimes there are tasks that you're sharing, with other people on the team. And certainly, it's not uncommon for us to have creative conversations with the director or
Right.
to be discussing what the needs and obligations of our art department are. So it can be very all encompassing at times, which for me is kind of the fun part of it too. You're
Yeah.
doing a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
uh,
that's that's actually really interesting, because you always hear that. You'll see producer, associate producer, executive producer, whatever the title is, and you kind of wonder, what exactly
well, and those things
do.
those things have their own distinction. So if you're looking at a film, you know a producer with no modification in front of it is what I've sort of just described. If you have
Yeah.
an executive producer, typically it means they are either the investors or financiers or somebody involved
Okay.
in kind of putting the financing together or executing things that enabled the movie to move forward. Maybe
Right.
they, sometimes they might have assisted in casting or bringing somebody on board or some asset that was, imperative to making the production a reality. Whereas a co-producer, an associate producer might be a similar thing in that they have assisted the production in some way, but aren't as involved, financially
Right.
as an executive producer or with the day-to-day production as a producer. A line producer typically works, right under a producer, and is really where my background came from. I line produced for a number of years, and they're in charge of overseeing the schedule and usually draft the initial preliminary schedule that we use in order to draft a budget, which is another thing that they typically do. And then they're in charge of the day-to-day operations,
Right.
And all of the coordinating that goes with that. And it is a very, very difficult job that to me is probably the most overlooked thing, because for the most part, a movie's kind of, the credit, good or bad, a director is going to receive. If they don't, maybe the producer receives a little bit, but really a line producer deserves a lot of that, because they're really integral to making a movie a reality. You simply can't do it without them or somebody like them. There are, on these smaller movies, instances where I will sort of do both. I prefer not
Right.
to, you don't have to. But sometimes, budget won't allow it, and it's sort of double duty for me and for a number of my contemporaries. Television's a little different, where the executive producers tend to be your showrunners and your sort of lead staff writers. So
Okay.
they're the people that are with the series forever, or at least for a season or a couple seasons, and are really in charge of pushing the narrative forward in a holistic way, and maintaining style and tone and story. And you'd have individual directors come in maybe for episodes, but they're not there for all of them. And then a producer is typically a little bit more in episodic stuff, kind of what a line producer would be. So there are differences, but that's usually what the distinctions are. Not always, but usually.
Yeah, that helps quite a bit. I love the kind of the business model analogy, because it's like that in business. Your line producers sound a lot like your frontline managers.
Yes.
They get a lot of the dirty work, but not much of the credit. Now they might get some of the blame if it doesn't go right.
That's sort of the unfortunate. It's like they always get the negative stuff, when it goes wrong, but when stuff goes so well, a lot of the credit is due to them, but they don't usually get
it. That's one of those where they're the boss of the front line is usually the one that says, well, I was the one that put him in the position.
Yeah. Well, that's why I've always sort of described the job. I mean, both, as a producer, but certainly as a line producer, is that you're sort of just a fireman, or like a Dementor from Harry Potter, except you're just sucking up shit. You get all the crap, but none of the credit.
Well, so how you started? You said you kind of started out as a line producer, but how did you get into the entertainment business?
Well, even before that, I went to the University of Puget Sound. I was majoring in theater, and I'd originally gone to university on a debate scholarship. I was a big debater.
Oh, okay.
And I got into debate in college, and I think because it had taken up so much of my life in high school, I just got sort of tired of it.
Sure.
And I think I had to take an elective, and somehow I got into acting, 101 or something, like that. And I had so much fun in the class. I was like, I'm gonna start taking more theater classes. And I started taking more of them. And I was like, I really like this. And I'd always loved movies, since I was a kid. I was one of those, kids that had the little VHS camcorder and the cardboard box and, was making home movies. I never really thought of it as a career. And my first foray, was really into theater. And I love theater, and I still do. But pretty soon into that, within a year or two after I declared my major, I was like, I'm really interested in film is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I started kind of, taking the necessary classes and, interning in Los Angeles during my summers and sort of getting ready to do that. And I was lucky enough to land an internship for like two or three summers in a row at Xenon Pictures, which at the
Oh
time
yeah.
was the largest urban Spanish language alternative programming distributor in the United States. They did, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. They had all the Wu-Tangs, all the Van Peebles stuff. It
wow.
was, Rudy Ray Moore, Dolomite was theirs.
Big time.
And my dad's good buddy, Lee Savage, is the CO. Lee, of course, has gone on to
Oh,
do the original draft of the screenplay for Straight Outta Compton, because he's the guy
right.
that got the rights to it and has done some, really big stuff. But that was my first job there, and as an intern, I was doing peon level duties. But after college, Lee offered me a job. And so I went to work, and I worked there for a few years, sort of went my way up the corporate ladder and started doing more serious work at the company in acquisitions, buying films
Yeah.
for Xenon to distribute, and marketing as well. So when I was there, we were doing like Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror, National Lampoon's TV the Movie,
Yep.
Kenny, which was this really great mockumentary. If you've never seen it, that was from Australia about a guy that cleaned porta potties, and it was fun. It was a really fun time, and for being a Greenfoot in Los Angeles, it was a great way for me to get experience, and I got to meet all these neat people and do really fun things. And after a few years, I felt like I sort of garnered, the Rolodex or necessary resources to start making stuff on my own.
Yeah.
And so I had an opportunity to produce my first feature film, and that was like, geez, like 15 years ago, maybe longer, wow. And I just haven't stopped since. So yeah, that kind of brings. I mean, I'm skipping probably,
Well, yeah, but
a number of things. I'm on my third production company, and but
that's a journey.
Yeah, it was a journey. It was fun.
What was your first feature?
First feature was called Perfect Sport, which we shot on Vashon Island in Washington, which is where I grew up. And one of my childhood friends directed the film. And at the time, this is kind of when the Lonely Girl 15 stuff was popular.
Yeah.
And Tony, my buddy, who was the director, O'Brien, he had just got out of New York's the Film Academy in LA, and Jessica Rose, who is Lonely Girl 15, had been there for a period with him. So she starred in it. Stella Keitel, who's Harvey, and Lorraine Bracco's daughter, and Tony starred in the lead role as well. Gary Hudson. It was a fun little film, and for us, I think we really learned a lot. Because we were all early 20s. And you think you've got it all figured out, and I think we got a rude awakening into how difficult a lot of the process was, but it was a nice way, especially with the support of family and friends, and filming in our hometown. It was a really excellent way to learn.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I that probably, I mean, if you go into it and you don't have that familiarity with your friends and family, and you're in your hometown, much more difficult, I think. Your margin of error is a little smaller.
Yeah. It was nice to have people pick us up when we fell down.
Yeah.
That made it a little bit more manageable, I think.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
Because we were over our head in a lot of respects. Probably at the business level. But the film turned out really neat, and we were all very grateful to have made it, and it jump started a handful of people's careers that are now still working and doing other neat stuff.
Well, and that's got to feel good. If you can have a
Yeah.
hand in kind of getting people started, that has to feel good. Do you, so when, how do you kind of come across projects that you think, okay, I want to be involved in this? Are you out there looking for them, or are people bringing them to them? How's that come about?
I don't actively solicit outside of kind of our circle of contemporaries that we work with regularly. That's not to say that I'm not involved or haven't been involved with projects that have come from outside people, but in general now at Lexicon, I own the company with another filmmaker, Justin Foya, who directed Point of Defiance and Doe. And most of the stuff that we're doing kind of moving forward are scripts that he and I have written together. So a lot of our work now is internally generated. Prior to that, over the last 2 to 3, 4 years, it has been from other good friends that I've known a long time that are screenwriters or directors, including people like Melora Walters. Dave Madelon did the clearing for us. Dave was, a friend I had met through mutual friends and wound up being my neighbor in Los Angeles for a number of years. And I would see him on the weekends, and we would have beers out on the porch, and we would always talk about, well, it'd be fun to do a film together. And then, eventually it happened.
That's awesome.
So I think, I think that's probably the case for a lot of filmmakers. You start to sort of establish your social circles there. And if you have similar sensibilities and, likes, you start to kind of see if there's opportunity to work together. And things come together. That being said, a lot of it is word of mouth too, where maybe somebody has a positive experience on a production. It's not uncommon that I will get emails introducing me to other people, say, you guys might want to, have a chat. You have some things in common, movie wise, and gravitate towards similar content. So it's a bit of a crapshoot. I don't think there's any one way. You just kind of navigate through your networking and put your own projects together, but sometimes you get involved with other stuff that you would never have thought you would.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I like that you've gotten to the point now where you're writing some of your own stuff, at least contributing, because I think for me, that's where ultimately, if I was doing that, that's where I would want to get, to actually have some direct contribution instead of kind of the support role.
I think, and part of that, maybe it's a little bit of a control freak thing, but it does allow, even, the fact that I've been editing a number of our features lately too. I feel at my best when the I can contribute, even on the creative end, the better apt I am to position the film in a business sense as well, and kind of wrap my head around what the film is or isn't, so that as a producer, I can do my job a lot better. And that's what works for me. I don't know that it works for everybody. And I think you just kind of find your own function, and I think, especially among producers, I think there's a lot of us that approach things very, very differently.
Yeah. Have you ever stepped in front of the camera or had the desire to do that?
Oh, I've done, and I wouldn't say it's something I would want to do in a professional sense. I will sometimes do small, I don't even know if I'd call them cameos, but it'll be things like when we were shooting Doe, for example, Stacey Oristano plays this young woman. The lead, Timothy Davis, goes to, his name's John, of course, in the movie, goes to visit to try and find some clues about who he may or may not be. And he had a husband that died. So she took pictures of me, and so I show up, in a picture. I did do years ago, Preston Lacey from Jackass fame and Sam Macaroni and a couple of guys. We had Dean Bahar in it. And it was called The Life of Lucky Cucumber, this really obtuse, ridiculous mockumentary made in the early 2000s. But I did play a role in that, which I think was, some sort of, it's comedy, but I played some sort of horrible, rapist on the bus but so it's been fun to do that occasionally, but it's not something I treat as a career or whatever plan on doing. I think I feel a lot more comfortable behind the camera.
Yeah.
Not to say maybe if there was some passion project I thought up and like I would be good at it, but
yeah, it's not
general,
easy.
I like telling the story, not being in the
So
story.
once you get a project that you're interested in and your company becomes involved in, do you finance that project completely, or do you then have to go out and kind of fundraise and find additional?
We have a group of investors that we work with fairly regularly, and some of them are for some projects and others for different ones. So it just sort of depends on the particular project. We'll usually present it to a number of people, but we're also always open, to working with new financiers. And every films are hard, especially at the independent level. And unless you just have some giant nut that you're sitting on as a company, most of the time you are pulling from, equity, or maybe you're exploring institutional resources for financing. And it is, the hardest part of making a movie, even once you decide to make it, is, to put the financial plan together. And so it's just, I wish that there was just some formulaic way that it worked for us, but it's a little different every time.
Yeah. So then you've got the funding, you start, you go through the process of filming, and then where do you go? Do you go like the kind of the I don't know what you call it, the
distribution,
the film festival route? Do you go?
Well, it's changed a lot recently, and I would say it's changed even more in light of the pandemic.
Yeah.
The sort of typical, lifespan of an independent film would be, development / financing. Once it's greenlit to go, you go into pre-production, which is just preparing to shoot, which usually for most independent films is lasting somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks. You would then go into principal photography, which is usually lasting 4 to 6 weeks for most indies. And then post-production, which can last anywhere from 12 to 24 weeks or longer, depending on what's involved. It's heavy visual effects. It can sometimes take quite a long time. But subsequent to that, so you have a finished product, you're either engaging distributors yourself as a producer if you have those connections, which is something that we typically do, because having worked in distribution myself, I know a lot of that people do. And then, I've worked over the years, there's a number of distributors that I work with regularly. Or you're engaging a sales agent who would be doing the same thing on your behalf, which, then they're entitled typically to a commission for makes. We have used sales agents in the past. Sometimes we'll do it, myself. Usually we use sales agents for international distribution, because most of the distribution deals that I'm negotiating are just for North American rights. But we've even started doing a lot more direct international sales that I do as well. So it kind of depends on the project and how busy or overwhelmed I'm feeling. Like earlier this year, for example, we had kind of like 4 films finish at once that were all doing the same thing, shopping or delivering to distributors and getting ready. And it was a case where there was 2 films I we normally would have handled the distribution negotiations for, but it was just I was too busy delivering the other films that I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So that'll happen occasionally. I'm hoping to sort of reduce that, or prevent rather that scenario from ever happening again, because I felt a little for a few months. But then, a film will be released. If typically you're going to release, if it's a domestically made film or produced film, it's going to be released North America first, and then go to international territories, after a handful of months later. But a film, will start, it's either doing theatrical or not. Sometimes do day and date, which is it'll do limited theatrical and also be available on TVOD platforms like Cable Satellite, Apple and Vudu and Amazon. But it's just, it's rental or purchase transactions. After the TVOD phase, you go into pay TV, and then SVOD, which is, the distributors licensing the film to Netflix or Hulu. You're doing second TV periods, you're doing broadcast TV, ancillary stuff with hotels and airlines and trains, and the list goes on. A film makes most of its money typically in the first 2 years.
Okay.
There are cases, of course, where a film kind of gains cult popularity later, or has some new resurgence for another external reason where it can kind of live another life. Or if it was, particularly popular, there's some that just make money, significant money forever. But for the most part, you're doing most of your big haul the couple of years.
Right. Well, so you're doing all of this stuff. How are you finding time to edit as well? That sounds
well. That a big part of that for ours were decisions that we may have made in production where, we had to dump more money into something during principal photography than we had anticipated, which then meant that post budgets were getting cut somewhere. I have a background as an editor, having done it for a number of years, particularly in the commercial space. So sometimes it's, excuse me, an easy way to save a few bucks was, I'll edit it. Of course, it sounds like an easy decision to make when you're making it. Then we would get there and I'd be like, God damn it. Now I've got to edit this movie and I don't have a ton of time. So the honest truth is you're just, at least for me, I'm sort of handling my 9 to 5, usual producing responsibilities. And then I was getting a 6-pack and, in the computer editing bay from, 7 to 2 in the morning, working on whatever feature it was I was working on at the time.
Yep. A little after hours work.
Yeah. So it was not a lot of, you don't have a social life when it's like working 2 jobs.
Yeah. No, my son is in school now for film editing, and he's only done, some short film type stuff, but I've got to see, kind of what's involved in just on that level. And that's not particularly easy. So I can't imagine on a full feature length film. That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of trial and error. That's really editing it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So what what are some of the features that you have completed that we can see some of your work in?
Yeah, there's a lot that are even available now. They're just starting to hit Amazon's free stream service. So a handful of these you can stream for free. There's a few you can't, that you still have to purchase or rent. But let me think about this, because we've had so many in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Doubting Thomas, which is a kind of a racial drama that was available on Amazon. You can stream for free now. Stars Will McFadden, who also wrote and directed the film. Sarah Butler, kind of from my Spit on Your Grave fame. She was also in Before Sun Explodes. She's a fabulous actress. Jamie Hector, who played Marlowe on The Wire. He's on Bosch now. He was on The Strain.
Yeah, he's really good on Bosch, actually.
Yeah, he's great. The film is about a white couple that gives birth to a black child,
Okay.
and the lead's best friend, who's played by Jamie, is black, and he, has some suspicion that he thinks that maybe his wife and his best friend cheated, and it really explores, some super topical issues in our status now, about race and love and friendship, and trust and all those sorts of things. The film did really well on the festival circuit, and we're very proud of it. You have Point Defiance, which we actually shot on Vashon in the house I'm sitting in now.
That's awesome.
It was directed by my partner at Lexicon, Justin Foya. He wrote the script with his brother, but it's got Derek Phillips, Friday Night Lights, Longmire, Josh Karate, who's kind of a newcomer, but he's just phenomenal in this film. Lauren, Elaine Skirvin, Sarah Butler's in this one as well, and then Stephen Swadley, who's another one of my producing partners and an actor in the Kickboxer franchise and a number of things. That film is a thriller. There's a man on house arrest, and his brother shows up kind of the blue from having just played to Afghanistan, and it is a very twisted sort of murder mystery, so to speak.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Which was all written by Justin, stars Anthony Davis and Tatiana Ali, Matthew St. Patrick, Mira Sorvino. It's about a man wakes up on a park bench. He has no memory of who he is or how he got there, so he winds up starting a new life. He can speak dozens of languages fluently. He doesn't know why. And so he gets married to Tatiana, and another man from his past shows up with some sort of clues to who he might be, which sends him tumbling down the proverbial rabbit hole to figure out who he is and what happened to him. Both that film and Point Defiance are available on Amazon as well.
Yeah, I got to check both those out. Those casts sound really, really good, and the stories sound great.
Yeah. And then you've got Water Lily Jaguar, which is directed by actress turned writer-director Melora Walters, who I know you know. That Paul Thomas.
She's very proud of that one.
She is. And Paul Thomas Anderson is executive producer on the project, but you've got James LeGros, Mira Sorvino, Dominic Monaghan, Christopher Backus, a number of people. And it's about James plays a famous novelist, sort of like an airport bestseller.
Yeah.
Who's trying to write something of more import, and in writing his magnum opus, kind of his relationship start to fall apart in his obsession. It's definitely a very Melora movie and really neat kind of character drama.
Yeah.
And then more recently, we had The Clearing, which Crackle picked up as an original that you can watch for free, Crackle, or you can rent it or buy it on Amazon, and a number of other platforms for all of these. I just can never keep it in my head where they all
no wonder.
are.
That's so much. Yeah, that's a lot.
It stars Liam McIntyre. Yeah, it's been a busy couple of years. But Liam McIntyre of Spartacus fame, played Spartacus. He passed, and he plays a dad that takes his daughter camping, and zombie apocalypse breaks out, and find her and save her. And it's really just sort of a fun zombie assault horror action romp.
Oh, that's awesome.
With neat special effects, and it's a fun movie. Liam's great. But those, and then Lolo, which is another sort of, I was just an executive producer on this film, but directed by my good friend Nick Ritchie, who also wrote the script, and is a kind of age film about a group of girls sort of on the eve of graduating, what they're going to do moving forward, but profiles them during one night. And he did a fabulous job with that movie, and it's just a lot of really great young actresses, flexing their muscle, but it's a very neat film as well.
Yeah, yeah, that all sounds like really fun. That's some. I mean, it's movies that have really strong cast. That's
Yeah.
pretty neat. Which I'm sure doesn't hurt when you're trying to market that. When you have recognizable names, that's got to be a bonus. But that's really exciting. What
Yeah.
have you like with me? The things that we're involved in, I'm a fan of just, I kind of go into it with a fan's mindset. So I'm the whole time I'm just like, whoa, wow, everything's awesome with that. Are you like that? Are you a fan of certain things so you have to kind of dial that back, or do you go into it and it's just a business and you kind of operate it that
You
way?
mean like working with specific actors or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been lucky enough to get to work with, a number of people that I have, long been fans of their work. I think, once you start to work in the industry and you start to work with, a lot of celebrities or recognizable actors, there is a very humanizing thing that happens, where you get to introduce to them as an actual person. And
Right.
so it does shatter maybe some of the mysticism associated with it. Not that you don't respect them the same way,
Right.
but you do realize that they're a human being, just like you are. But I certainly think there's cases where we've got to work stuff with people I grew up watching even.
Right.
And it does, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of the fun part of playing sandbox is you do get to pinch yourself and, be like, this is the person I grew up as a fan of this person's work, and it's so neat to have the opportunity to work with them now,
Yeah.
myself. But yeah, you just gotta, you gotta keep it in perspective, I think.
Yeah, we talk a lot. We interview a lot of actors, and we talk about that because it's very, on the fan side, it's very hard to hold that in. So when you run into someone that you're a fan of, and especially just out in public, you know, that's a kind of once in a lifetime encounter for you.
Right.
So it's very hard to hold that in. But for them, that's just they're just going about their day. So you have to be respectful
Yes.
and not
Yeah.
and not just become a nuisance with that. And the majority, from people that we've talked to, are very good at handling that. They kind of take it as that's just part of the job. But I always find that interesting, and that's a great point about the humanizing part, because it does take away a little of the mystique once you've had those conversations and you see, well, they're just like me. They're extremely talented as an actor, but otherwise they're just a normal person. It's just everything's basically the same. So I think
Yeah,
that's a really
yeah.
good
I
point.
mean, after you've had a few lunches or dinners together,
Yeah.
or sat around the crafty table and had a few conversations, it can be it's actually really quite neat,
Yeah.
uh, and I've always felt very lucky, and blessed to be able to do this, for a living, because
Yeah.
it's super fun.
Yeah.
I like doing
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your plans for the future? Do you have a direction you're trying to take the business in? Is there a next step?
Well, since the pandemic started, we had a project that was getting ready to shoot out in Romania, that
Okay.
went into limbo, that we're hoping to revive soon. But we've got a couple other projects, scripts that Justin and I have just finished that we're pushing forward and discussing with potential financial partners as well. I think it's hard for a lot of us indie, producers, where we're still kind of figuring out exactly how to navigate the landscape and keep people safe,
Right.
abide by all of the COVID protocols, and still produce content of quality. And there are a lot of people that I think are in the middle of figuring that stuff out now. I think there are some of us that are a little bit more skeptical and would like to wait and see other people do it
That's
first,
right.
before we start risking
Yeah.
investors' money. I also think, the interesting thing is, on one hand, industry is starved for content right now.
Yeah, it really is.
And you don't have nearly as many productions as you typically do. So there's a demand for it, which on one hand could be very attractive to an investor because it probably means you have competition. There's a high likelihood,
Right.
no matter what the quality of the film is, that you could do, fairly well if it was marketed appropriately. On the flip side of that, where's this market going to be in 6 months
Yeah.
or a year when he's actually coming out? And I think you have a lot of people that are fearful and don't want to, invest money in what is already a high risk, high reward industry until they see that it's returned to normal.
Yeah.
So it's a very tumultuous terrain right now. And I think we're all trying to sort of doing our best to figure out what it means, for us individually and for our companies, and different people are in different places. So we've got a few that we're trying to push forward. I think we're kind of looking at early next year.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll happen before the end of the year. And we're in that sense, we're also sort of taking a break, for the next couple months to do some development work on stuff that we are hoping to do.
Yeah.
But it will be really interesting. I mean, I think you're looking already at seismic shifts in the way films are distributed, and I think you have a lot of smaller boutique distributors that aren't going to be able to survive, the next 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
You have some already that have shuttered. And so the studios, they have enough money that they'll survive. I think they may have to adapt, to how those films are released, meaning a lot of these probably can't go to theaters first anymore. I know a lot of the
Yeah.
studios postponing their release dates, hoping
Yep.
it'll be normal again by next year. If we aren't, I think you're going to start seeing major motion pictures that will go to Amazon Prime Cinema and direct to TVOD,
Right.
for the 20 to $30 or whatever it is they decide to charge. And I think that there is, an opportunity for that. There are films already that have done quite well, although a handful of them are sort of catered to children, which,
Sure.
it's a good babysitter right now to sit them in
That's
front of
right. That's
trolls or
right.
something.
Yeah.
But it will be super interesting to see. But I think if you have one of these mid-tier distributors shut, and a lot of us in the independent sphere have, it's a challenging time where a lot of our movies aren't getting the same sort of domestic deals that they used to.
Yeah.
This is probably a whole nother, hour-long conversation about why I think that is, or why a number of my contemporaries think it is. But there may be a silver lining to COVID where that changes a little bit. And kind of like the music industry, I think you're going to start seeing a lot of independent filmmakers start looking at self-releasing films. And you have the Shane Crews of the world who have done this to some degree, with varying degrees of success.
Sure.
It's a scary thing to do because it involves money, a lot of other money than you're already spending on your production. And also involves a ton of elbow grease and work that you have to put into it, kind of assuming the role of distributor. But there are starting to be really substantial options now, in my professional opinion, that would dissuade an independent filmmaker, taking a minimum guarantee for less than six figures for a film, North American rights, and instead taking that money, dumping it in their own marketing, using an aggregator and getting it everywhere they can, and you're taking more money back home. So it's certainly something on my radar and on our mind, and something that we're thinking about and exploring. I don't think that means that we won't work with distributors anymore, but I do think it means, depending on the particular film, our distribution model may change, and we may be looking at more direct releases ourselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I spoke with Lonnie Tupu last night, who he was an actor on Farscape, but he's living
Mhm.
in Australia and he's acting. They have every set, they've got sets that are in production. Every set has a COVID supervisor.
Mhm.
So he's acting in that role for a production right now, and it's basically because I was asking him, how are you getting around, intimate scenes, where you have people in close contact with each other, and he said it's very difficult. They're doing things like, if you have normally you would have people in a car sitting side by side together, now you may have to have one in the front seat, one in the back seat, just to keep that difference. And it's eliminated a lot of the romantic scenes, in
Sure.
in films. And I think that's going to be interesting, especially things that are made in the next year, to see just how, that is portrayed. I think there's going to be a lot of off screen type of, they're going to talk about it, but you're not going to see that type of thing, until we get a vaccine where it's safe for people to
Oh, totally. I mean,
contact.
you touched on the COVID sort of compliance officer. That's a SAG mandated thing that we have to do now. So if you're working with SAG actors, you're going to have to be testing every 2 days. You
Yeah.
know, and this is kind of what I was discussing earlier, where there are a lot of inherent complications. Even though I think it's great that people are opening back up for productions, but
Sure.
like, insurance isn't going to cover COVID related stuff. So what happens if your lead actor, gets COVID,
Right.
right? They're
Yeah. What
gone
do you
for at
do?
least a minimum of 2 weeks. You got to test everybody else. For an independent film, losing 2 weeks of production is an
Yeah.
incredible financial hit that most probably could not afford to take.
Right.
So that's scary to me. Particularly, as thinking of like any sort of fiscal responsibility or financial responsibility I have to our investors, where that's a really big risk to take, with their money. Similarly, I can't imagine, and speaking to your point, I think it'll be really interesting to see over the course of the next year how many scenes are you going to have with hundreds of extras.
Yeah.
How are you going to
Can't
scene
do it.
in a club with 200 people? You can't. And so that drastically affects creatively, some of the scenes that you would conjure up or envision, or, maybe there are scripts that are written a particular way that are going to have to be drafted to accommodate for those things. I
Right.
do think in general, then you're going to see a lot more very contained settings,
Yeah.
contained stories, and it will be fun, despite the fact that it's disappointing that we can't do those things anymore. But it will be very fun to see how creative people get with that. I always find, and this is sometimes why I enjoy doing, independent films rather than films that have tens of millions of dollars at their disposal, is that challenges force you to be really creative,
Yeah.
and you sometimes come up with the greatest stuff that you would just never think of in a million years,
That's
because
right.
there's a limitation placed on you, and you
Yeah.
have to figure out how to be an effective storyteller with this particular limitation or limitations.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. I'm excited to see what people do.
I've heard, and I hope that this turns out to be the case, that we may see a toning down of the big budget special effects driven, feature, and more of a focus on the writing and the acting. And I hope that actually comes about.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I've lamented, for the last several years that, as excited I know that people get about the Marvel movies and Star Wars and the big budget tentpoles, in the last 20 years, we have really seen kind of the, mid budget drama just
Right.
disappear.
That's right.
And the studios also, the movies that they're making are adaptations of existing intellectual property. They're not original scripts. You're not seeing, big budget original stories made anymore. And I think that maybe there will be, some refreshing material that we get in the next year when people are forced to make these more contained sort of smaller stories, where you're going to start to see some of that stuff come back with really notable talent and, both in front of and behind the camera involved. So I'm kind of excited about that part of it, because I've been hoping that we could, move back into that space. And some of those films are successful. Maybe it will encourage the studios to reconsider spending more money once we're fully back open and have a vaccine on making some original movies, and taking, the $100 million they were going to spend for the marketing on this movie, and instead, make a movie that we used to get.
Yeah, that's my hope as well. I think that would be one positive that could come, out of this trying time.
Well, and that's I've always been, I think, because a number of our movies, for example, like Point Defiance is a very contained film.
Yeah.
I have always been very interested in other filmmakers that are doing those things, and how they approach those challenges and work with them. A really fabulous film, I think, super contained, was Ex Machina. I think what Alex Garland did with that script was just genius. And it was exceptional.
Yeah, that was a great movie.
Well.
Yeah, it was great.
I thought it was this is a perfect example where this film takes place, other than the opening and the closing scene, all in one location.
Yeah.
You never feel like the film is that small the entire time you're watching it. And that's a testament to the narrative he was able to craft. You don't ever feel stuck. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, really well done. You're exactly right. Well, Mark, this has been terrific. Yeah, I really appreciate you giving us the look kind of behind the producer scene. I think that's something we get asked a lot. What is it the producer does? And it's you get different answers, but I think you did a really good job kind of explaining the different roles that a producer can have, including like an executive producer being more of the financial side, where a producer is more like a CEO. That was really good. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Melora said, at Mark, he's going to do right by you. And I was like, okay, because I got questions. She was right.
Of course. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah,
absolutely. And please stay in touch, and definitely when you get those projects getting ready to come back and talk to us about them. We'll
absolutely
we'll do that. That would be great. Before I let you go, if our listeners, our viewers, they want to know a little bit more about your company or the things that you're working on, where can they go? Where are you on social media?
On social media, see, on Instagram, I'm my full name, which is at Mark Mathias, Mark with a K, nice. M-A-R-K, Mathias, M-A-T-H-I-A-S, Sayre, S-A-Y-R-E. And I think it's the same on Twitter. Let me see.
I know. I always have to look on our Twitter one too.
It's Mark M. Sayre on Twitter.
Okay.
So you can find me both of those places. I do try to post, if there's anything new with respect to existing projects or new projects or any of that stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much. And I hope we can talk again real soon, and that everything returns to normal and we're able to, come out and see some daylight, interact a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
All right, Mark, hold on a second, and I'll hit pause for us. All right, so that was Mark Sayre, and wow, that was I love that. It's really informative. I think he broke it down really nicely, exactly what a producer does, the role that they can play, and it's a big role. but also gave us a pretty good look behind the scenes for how productions and filming of TV shows and movies is happening right now, and the difficulties that's posing. So I thought that was really informative. Hope you enjoyed that. Really great and talented gentleman there. So hopefully we can have him back on at some point and talk some more. Really appreciate you listening to us. I know you've got a lot of avenues and venues that you can go to listen and to choose programming, and we're really appreciative of the fact that you choose us again and again. That's not something we take lightly, and we're doing our best to improve and to bring you good content. So I hope we're doing that. Please check us out. We've got a new website at meistercon.com. You can find all of our podcasts there, video and audio, a lot of good content. Brett has a couple of different blogs that he's posting on there. It's really good, fun stuff. So please check that out. You can find us on Facebook under MeisterCon. And, we've talked a little bit on these episodes about the fact that we're building a podcasting studio. We found the location, we've purchased the building. Now we're in the process of kind of putting that all together. We can definitely use help. So if you're interested in helping, fund the podcast, even a few dollars is a really big help. You can find us at patreon.com/MeisterCon. We'll give you some early access and some special bonuses for your trouble, and we'd appreciate the help. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye.